Chapter 27. Bo Meacham had grown fond of being in Hobie's restaurant in those early morning hours before the sun had time to penetrate the deep winter shadows that hung between the buildings of River Street. Only in its external serenity was life abnormal there, but Bo felt comfortable as he claimed the middle stool each weekday morning and entered into the matrix of warm wood colors, breakfast odors, and a glass window where the history of Ravenel could be unobtrusively charted on any given day by the voluble fauna who formed its early morning cadre. He had been a regular for over 6 months now, and as he drove toward Hobie's at 07:10 hours, he knew the ceremonies that had taken place only minutes before. Ritual had a tang of divine law and was strictly adhered to by the boys of Hobie's. At 7 a.m., Ed Mills entered the restaurant the moment Hobie Rawls turned the lock. The two men nodded to each other ceremoniously, a wordless salutation that had not changed in 20 years. Ed walked to the first stool nearest to the window and sat down. Even though he was not carrying his mailbag, he listed to the right as though he were. It was unwritten protocol that neither of the men would speak until Ed had consumed his first cup of coffee. At 5 after 7, Zell Posney, the one-legged lawyer, walked through the door, the bells announcing his entry. He walked slowly with a constrained dignity, hoping to conceal the presence of his artificial limb. He was followed by Johnny Voight, Cleve Goines, and Doc Rattery, but the order of their entry was subject to caprice and alteration. A man could set his watch by the arrival of Ed and Zell. He could sort of set his watch by the arrival of the next three. Bo was dressed in his dark green winter uniform when he parked his squadron car in front of the bank and walked the 6 storefronts to Hobie's. It was the first Tuesday in February, and his breath was visible as he tightened the belt around his blouse. "Good morning, Grits," Bo roared as he entered the restaurant and proceeded to the middle stool. "Oh, Jesus, here comes Douglas MacArthur," Ed Mills said. "Smiley, how you doing? Ed, your face is sunshine itself, but that's 'cause you're just a slap-happy Southern boy." A man used to be able to enjoy a cup of coffee in here, Hobie, before the general came to town, that is, Ed lamented. "Good morning, Colonel," a couple of men said. "Hey, Doc," Johnny Voight said. "I've been having a bad cough for about a week. What expert advice do you recommend?" "For you? A frontal lobotomy, you God-blessed dimwit." "Doc's just sore 'cause Willie Taylor strangled to death in Doc's office the other day. The doc killed him by checking his throat with a tongue depressor," Hobie said, pouring Bull a cup of coffee. "By the way, you guys going to the big game tonight?" Bull asked. "What game?" Ed Mill asked. "Is there a game tonight?" Doc Rattery said, smiling. "I don't know about no game," said Hobie. "Okay, sports fans, don't give me a hard time, but you better get there early if I'm going to be able to save any seats around my family. A couple of pilots from my squadron will be at the game, too." "Does Ben think Calhoun's got a chance?" Cleve asked. "Chance? Calhoun's going to eat him alive tonight." "Peninsula's got some tall boys coming down here tonight built like marsh birds," Johnny added. "Zell, you ain't seen the general's boy play yet, have you?" Hobie asked. "I've never liked spectator sports." "He prefers Opry and ballerine shows," Cleve teased. "Zell's a man of culture." "Zell, it'd do you good to come to that game tonight," Bull said. "You're starting to get the smell of stacks about you. You've been hanging around that law office too long." "General, you know old Poyster at the hardware store?" Ed Mills asked. "He comes in here some mornings, doesn't he?" Bull said. "Yeah, the tow-headed so-and-so with 2 busted a-holes for eyes. Well, he was in here the other day running his mouth about how good Peninsula was and how they were going to beat the stuffing out of Calhoun." "What'd you say to him, Ed?" "I just walked up to Poyster and gave him a chance to shine his butt in front of everybody. I said, 'Poyster, I'd like to make you a little bet about that Peninsula Calhoun game.' He looked at me kind of funny and said, 'How much you willing to bet, Mills?' I looked back at him, and without blinking an eye, I said, $100 damn, and you can ask anyone in here if that ain't the New Testament truth." 30. "It's okay. It's true, okay," Voices said. "What'd he say then?" Bull asked. "He put the emergency brake on that motor mouth of his." "What would you have done if he'd taken the bet?" Bull asked. "They'd have had to clean that stool Ed was sitting on." Cleve Goines laughed. See you boys at the game tonight. I gotta go keep the world safe for democracy. Hey, Colonel, Slinky yelled at Bull. What? Slinky? I don't remember that name. Why don't we just go ahead and nuke the hell out of Moscow, Havana, and Peking? We're gonna have to do it someday anyhow, so why don't we just get on with it so we don't have to worry about it? Sure thing, Slinky. I'll send out 3 lieutenants this afternoon to get the job done. No sense in procrastinating any longer. That afternoon, Bull returned home early, too excited about the game with Peninsula to concentrate on the niggling administrative details that caused him more annoyance than any other element in his role as squadron commander. When he walked in the back door at 4 in the afternoon, he found his family sitting in the kitchen, listening to Arabelle reel off stories of her late husband. Now, Moultrie was a hard-working man. You go and ask anyone about Moultrie Smalls, and they tell you that he wouldn't run from no work. My man worked many jobs during the Hoover years. Lord, we hate them Hoover years. If it wasn't for the river and the shrimp and fishes we could catch, Arabelle wouldn't be talking this trash to you folks right now. This kitchen is filthy, Bull said sternly as he walked in the door. What you mean, Captain? Arabelle snapped from behind the stove. The whole kitchen's clean as a collection plate. What you talking about? Bull did not answer. Rather, he continued into the dining room, inspecting corners and wiping his index finger across furniture. When he returned to the kitchen, he sighed heavily, then sat down on a chair next to the stove. The whole house is one big garbage dump. Captain, you're just talking stuff. You're just pleasuring yourself by running your mouth about nothing. Don't listen to him, Arabelle, Marianne said. Dad is so juvenile sometimes. It's getting gone time anyhow. I'll see you folks at the Sun. Bye-bye, Arabelle, Lillian said. Say hi to Toomer for me, Ben called as the maid walked out the back door. He then began to take imaginary jump shots against the kitchen wall. Get off your feet, Jocko, Bull said to Ben. You don't want to wear yourself out before the game. Go upstairs and take a nap. I'll give you a yell before we have to leave for the game. It so happened, Sugar, the whole family was having a very pleasant conversation before you barged in and insulted Arabelle. That's great, Bull answered, but you're going to continue it without Ben. I want his mind to be on the game and nothing else. I hear there are going to be college scouts all over the stands tonight. This helps me relax, Dad, Ben said, just sitting and talking. Who asked you? Get upstairs and into the rack on the double. I didn't ask you for a speech. I think you're more nervous than Ben, Lillian said after her son had left the kitchen. This is the big game, Lillian, the big game. If he screws up in this game, Calhoun doesn't go to the tournament and he blows his chance for a scholarship. So I want everybody in this family to cut the yapping and start thinking about the big game. So pleasant to have you home early, darling, Lillian said softly, lightly. I couldn't sleep last night. I was so worried about the big game, Marianne said. I woke up with a cold sweat and fever and 3 different types of cancer and a touch of rabies. Where's the paper? Bull said, ignoring his daughter. The afternoon paper's supposed to have a big spread about the game. It's in the living room, his wife said. Would you like me to make you a drink and send it in? Affirmative. Now, let's break up this little powwow and think about the big game. Daddy, I got an A in an English theme, Karen said. Would you like to read it? Nah, let your mother read it, he said. Led you in the kitchen. All right, children. Why don't all of you go do your homework so you'll have it done by the time we leave for the game? Lillian said, ushering Matthew and Karen toward their bedrooms. Take this drink to your father, darling, she added, handing a silver glass to Karen. I finished all mine in study hall, Marianne said. I think I'll go into the living room and read a book. I wouldn't if I were you, Lillian warned. You've got to learn how to interpret the signals your father gives off. I can. He always gives off the signals of a psychopathic killer, so it doesn't really make any difference how you interpret them. Shame on you. You're so disrespectful sometimes. You're always telling me I should try to get to understand my father better, that I never try to penetrate beneath his gruff exterior. I would choose my time with caution. Sometimes beneath that gruff exterior is a far gruffer one. Do you know that Dad and I have never had a single conversation in my whole life? That's just as much your fault as it is his, Marianne. He doesn't know me at all, and I don't know him. Your father loves you very much, Marianne. He brags about how smart you are to everyone he knows. Does he really? Marianne said with obvious delight. Of course he does. He never tells me he thinks I'm smart. He probably never thinks about it, Lillian said, turning toward her daughter and appraising her with arctically critical eyes. Even the temperature of her voice plunged when she said, "Why don't you go upstairs and find something real pretty and lacy to wear to the game tonight?" "I don't want to wear anything real pretty and lacy to the game. I prefer to wear something real ugly and frumpy instead." "I don't want to tell you this, Marianne, but you've backed me against a wall," Lillian said, her voice becoming a whisper, trembling with the promise of conspiracy. Lillian loved conspiracy, whether real or imagined. "Your brother Ben came to me yesterday and asked me if I'd talk to you about how you're dressing." "Ben did?" Marianne asked. Lines of doubt radiated from her narrowed eyes as she watched her mother. "Yes." "Why didn't he talk to me?" "He didn't want to hurt your feelings, but he did tell me that it embarrassed him to see you going to school and to basketball games so sloppy looking. He thinks you ought to have a little more pride than that. He says, and this is strictly between us boys, Marianne, because he made me swear not to tell you. He says that he is humiliated beyond words to see you walk into the gymnasium dressed in those baggy, wrinkled clothes you seem so fond of." "Ben didn't say that, Mama. That's you talking." "Ben mentioned it to me yesterday." "No, he didn't. Ben wouldn't care if I went stark naked. You see, I know Ben a lot better than you do. I even know you better than you do, and Ben wouldn't say that, but you would and just did." "Well, he's thinking it, Miss Smarty Pants. You better believe he's thinking it. If you have so little self-pride that you can't put on a little makeup and wear clothes that fit properly, then it's no wonder that your brother and sister are growing ashamed of you. When I was growing up, a young girl wouldn't be caught dead walking out her front door looking the way you do. Now, you've got a fairly nice figure, Marianne, and instead of wearing clothes to show your figure off, you wear clothes to hide it, and that is unnatural. That's why I'm so afraid you'll never catch a man worth the salt." "I hope I never catch a man like you caught." "You have to be so smart and so superior and so cute. Remember that it was me who gave you your love of reading and literature. But I never taught you to flaunt the fact that you are smart and can use words to hurt people. Men find that very unattractive." "Creep Marines find that very unattractive." "Sugar, I know men. A man's a man, and any man who isn't should go out with the morning trash. A woman has one job." "To be adorable. Everything else is just icing. Dressing nice to catch a man's eye is part of the game. I don't like creep boys looking at me." "That's what every woman wants," Lillian said harshly, "or should want." "Not me. It's too psychosexual for me." "Well, if I were you, and I'm certainly not, I'd dress nice for Ben's sake, if for nothing else. He's very upset." "I thought we decided Ben never said anything, Mama." "Get out of this kitchen this instant," Lillian ordered. "I don't even know why I waste my time trying to teach you how to be a woman. Karen wants to put her best foot forward. She takes advice." Marianne began to move toward the living room. She stopped, adjusted her glasses, and turned back to face her mother once again. She took a deep, sad breath and said, "You like Karen better than you like me, Mama." "It's not true," Lillian countered. "I love all my children equally. I love you for different things, but I love all of you exactly the same." "You know why you don't like me, Mama?" Marianne said. "Maybe everybody would like you better if you weren't so know-it-all. It's best for a woman not to know so much," Lillian snapped. "The reason you don't like me is because I'm not pretty." "That's the silliest, most asinine, most hateful thing I've heard in my whole life." "It's true. You don't know how to relate to an ugly daughter. Ugliness disgusts you." "Hush up, Marianne, hush up before I slap you across this room. What you're saying is not true. I am not that shallow. I am not that shallow, and I refuse to sit here and let you tell these terrible, vicious lies about me. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy living the life I've lived. Nothing worked out like I expected it would. Nothing. I thought everything would be lovely and everyone would be sweet and charming. There is so much poison in the world. You must learn to see the beautiful in things. I have. I can look at the ugliest man in the world and see a prince. I swear I can. It's a product of good breeding." "I look at the face of the ugliest man in the world and feel sorry for the man," Marianne said, "because I know what it's like to feel ugly." "Beauty is only skin deep." "That's not true. It's a lot deeper than that. It's the deepest thing in the world. It's the most important thing in the world." "You're just like your father," Lillian spit. "You are exactly like your father." Sometimes I can't even believe you're my child. If I ever leave your father, I'm going to take the other children with me and leave you with him. You used to tell me that when I was little, Mama, and it scared me to death, but it doesn't bother me at all now. Why not? 'Cause you're not going to leave him. You're the most hateful child I've ever met. You've never liked me. Don't say that. Don't ever say that again. You make me feel like I'm something vile. That's the way you've always made me feel, Lillian said, beginning to cry. Go on now, get out of my sight. I don't want to look at you or think about you. Everywhere you go, you make people feel unhappy. I want to think about something happy. Think about the big game. Go in and talk to your father. Try and drive him crazy like you do me. Marianne left the kitchen, her head arched proudly, yet somehow her departure had the look of retreat, of irredeemable loss. Lillian leaned against the stove and began to cry soundlessly. Then she stopped and resumed cooking the dinner with an unnatural smile on her face as she stirred the greens and forced herself to think about happy things. Marianne selected a chair directly opposite from where her father sat reading the paper. Choosing a magazine from a rack beneath her chair, she began to thumb through an old edition of the Saturday Evening Post. Then she began to steal glances at her father. In her heart, she was his silent ally, a fifth columnist, in Bull's inveterate assaults on the cellist discussions of the Old South that Lillian shoved in front of him. Lillian spoke of the Old South when Bull was in earshot as though it were a private garden deeded to her in a last heroic proclamation by the Confederate Congress. Marianne looked up from the magazine and made a conscious decision to have her first real conversation with her father. Hey, Dad, why do you love me more than any of your other children? She began, hoping to loosen him up with humor. Beat it, Marianne, I'm reading the sports section, he said, not unkindly. Paper did not quiver as he answered her. You know, Dad, you love me so much, it's about like incest. Do you know in literature that some fathers have been physically attracted to their daughters? It's pretty interesting, isn't it? Hey, Lillian, Bull yelled to the kitchen, lowering the paper to nose level. Your daughter's going ape crap out here. How about dragging her back to the kitchen and giving her a couple of dishes to wash? Let's have a conversation, Dad, Marianne continued. Just you and me, father and daughter. Let's bare our souls and get to know one another. I don't want you to get to know me. I like being an enigma, like a chink. Let me ask you a few questions, Dad, just a couple. Shoot, Bull answered, his head still hidden behind the newspaper. What's the saddest thing that's happened in your whole life? When DiMaggio retired. What's your favorite book? The Baltimore Catechism. What's your favorite poem? By the shores of Gitche-Gumee, by the shining big sea water. Who's your favorite person in history? The Virgin Mary. Who is your second favorite? The greatest and bravest of all fighter pilots, Bull Meacham, Bull said. Then he made a sweeping gesture of dismissal with his arm. Okay, the game is over, Marianne. Go knit booties for your first kid or something. You're starting to bother me. Hey, Dad, Marianne asked. Vamos, sayonara, adios, au revoir, and feed it out of here, Bull snapped. Am I a Meacham, Dad? Can girls be real Meachams? Girls without jump shots? Or am I a simple form of Meacham, like in biology? Marianne, the one-celled Meacham, or maybe I'm higher than that. Maybe I'm a covalentary Meacham? Yeah, Marianne, you're a simple form of Meacham. You're a girl. Now, scram, I'm starting to lose my temper. I'm going to give you a break and just pretend you're not here. I'm not going to listen to you or answer when you speak, Bull said, hiding himself behind newsprint once more. Marianne began a slow, arduously clumsy dance that began to accelerate as she circumnavigated her father's easy chair. What began as a dramatically delusory ploy to recapture her father's attention turned into a sad tarantella of girlish desperation. She began to sing as she danced around him. Hello, Dad, she sang, tickling beneath his chin as she circled him. Hello, Dad, it's me, your invisible daughter. You can't see me, but I'm always here. I'm always here, Daddy Pooh. I can't shoot a hook shot or a jump shot. I can't drive down the lane or score the winning bucket, but I'm here anyway. Yoo-hoo, Dad, it's me, the Phantom. Yes, it's Marianne the Phantom Girl, the real ghost of the old Huger Mansion. I'm always here, hovering about, unseen, unheard, and unspoken to. Dad, Dad. Beat it, Marianne. You caught a bad case of the weird somewhere today, the face behind the newspaper ordered. Marianne knelt down and hugged her father around the knees. He made no response to her gesture at all. Dad, I have something very important to tell you, she said, in a voice that could not stop singing. I'm pregnant, Dad. Yes, it's true, I'm pregnant. She stopped and waited for the newspaper to drop beneath eye level. Bo was reading an account of a Celtic Knickerbocker game that had gone into overtime. You didn't hear me, Dad. I'm pregnant. I'm going to have a baby. Rising again, Marianne resumed her dance around the chair. This time she pulled at her father's earlobes and tousled his hair. I'm pregnant with your grandchild, Dad. Get off my back, Marianne. Go to the kitchen and help your mother fix dinner. All I want to do is read the damn paper. I'm pregnant by a Negro daddy, a huge, fat-lipped, kinky-haired Negro named Rufus. Did you hear me, Daddy? Your son-in-law is a Negro, and your little high-yellow grandchild is going to come up to you and say happy. I didn't want to tell you this, Dad, but since we're bearing our souls to each other, I feel I ought to tell you he's also a pacifist homosexual, but you'll get to like him after a while. Dwarfs are easy to like, especially when they're crippled and retarded. Cut your yapping, Marianne. Go do your homework, her father said. I'm leaving, Dad, but I want you to know I can see through your gruffness, she said, reaching the first stair. She had stopped her song. I can see right through it, and I want you to know that I understand. Just me. Just me. As Ben awaited his father's call to dinner, he lay on his back, shooting a basketball toward the ceiling of his room over and over again. It was the wrist snap he worried about most before a game. If the wrist failed him, then the touch had fled, and he would be forced to challenge the tall men who dwelled beneath the basket with swift drives that they would quickly move to intercept. Karen opened his door softly and asked, Can I come in, Ben? Sure, Karen, Ben answered, although he was somewhat puzzled by her visit. When he saw her entering the room, Ben realized how very few times he and Karen had ever spoken to each other without another member of the family being present. How's school going? Fine. I'm the third smartest girl in the 7th grade. That's nice, Karen, Ben said. Guess what, Ben? I give up. I had my first period this week. That means I'm a woman now. That's what Mom said anyhow. Ben resumed shooting the basketball toward the ceiling. 3 times he shot, making sure his hand was parallel to the ceiling when he had followed through. What kind of grades did you get on your last report card, Karen? Mama told me you did real well. Mama says I can have babies now. You can't have a baby until you start having your period. Have you talked to Marianne about this thing? Ben asked. Yes, she told me you'd want to hear all about it. Yeah, that's great, Karen. I'm sure glad you told me. Are you all keyed up for the big game tonight? I was one of the last girls in my PE class to have a period. I was beginning to think I was never going to have one. Yeah, that must have been a big worry. I tried to tell Matt, but he didn't even know what I was talking about. He ran away. Matt is such a child sometimes. Yeah, poor old Matt, Ben said, twirling the basketball on his middle finger. Hey, look, Karen, it's been a lot of fun talking to you, but I really got to get my mind on the game. I'm going to be sitting with some girlfriends from my school. We'll be right under the scoreboard. Will you wave to us during warm-ups? Sure, but you'll have to watch close because I can't let Dad or Coach Spink see me. These friends want to meet you after the game. Is that all right, too? Meet 7th grade peasants? Me? Of course, Karen. This is all so silly. They want me to get your autograph, too. Come on, Ben said, grinning. No, they want it. You're kidding. You gotta be kidding. I'm not either. They made me promise to get it before the game. Why do they want it? I mean, it seems ridiculous to me. You're the star. Here's some paper. This must be a great group of friends you met here, Karen. They sound like real nice girls. What are their names? Cynthia Waters and Mary Helen Epps. Okay, Ben said as he wrote, speaking the words aloud. To Cynthia, the most beautiful woman I have ever laid my eyes on. Passionately yours, Ben Meacham. And to Mary Helen, the most gorgeous creature on earth. Adoringly yours, Ben Meacham. Thanks, Ben. They'll love that. I'll see you at dinner. Before you go, Karen, Ben said, rising and walking to his window. Do you know about, well, let me put it this way, very simply. You're talking about how you could have a baby now. Do you know about how you have babies and all that kind of stuff? Ben could feel a blush moving the length of his body, one that in a matter of seconds would be a full 5 feet, 10 inches tall. It was the first time that he ever thought a blush could have a measurable quantitative dimension. Sure, Ben, Karen said simply. You have sexual intercourse with a man. Yep. Well, it's been great talking to you, Karen, and I'll see you later on. It really has been great talking to you. Bye, Ben. Oh, Karen, Ben called. Yes. Congratulations on being a woman. Isn't it great? Karen said and left the room. The late afternoon consisted of a series of chance meetings, quiet conversations, and controlled showdowns, all dedicated to the belief that Ben required a matrix of silence for his fury to build against the invaders from Peninsula High School. When Lillian announced dinner, she did so in a barely audible whisper to Karen, who bore the news to her father in a hushed voice, then carried it to the other children upstairs as though she were a nun carrying news of a friar's death. She mounted the stairs with inestimable lightness. Is this all I get? Ben asked, when he joined the others at the dinner table. Your father makes out the menu before the game, sugar, Lillian said. Toast and tea isn't enough, he argued. You gotta have a light meal, otherwise you'll blow your cookies all over the place, Bull explained. Hey, Dad, you know what I can do? Matthew asked. Wait a minute, Matt, I'm talking to Ben. I think you can drive on this team, son. They play man-to-man, and that ought to be a piece of cake for you. At the beginning of the game, drive down the middle to see what they got. Somebody tries to stop you, lay the ball off. You know what I can do, Dad? Matt repeated. Hold your horses, Matt. If you can get their big man, Sanders, in foul trouble early in the game, then it ought to be a piece of cake for the whole team. Now, that little pimp of a guard they got, Peanut Abbott, Bull said, opening the newspaper and checking the name. Yeah, that's the Pogue's name. Well, he says in the paper, and I quote, Meacham will be lucky to score a point. We're going to cut his water off good. How do you like them apples, huh? I guess that gets your blood boiling, huh? How about it? Yes, sir, Ben said. Hey, Dad, Matt said. What in the hell do you want, Matt, for crying out loud? If you just listen to him, Bull, Lillian said. The family stared at Matt, waiting for him to speak. Instead, he rose from the kitchen table, went to the cupboard where the canned goods were kept, and removed a quart can of peaches. He set the can of peaches on the table in front of him. I can eat this whole can of peaches in less than 60 seconds, he announced. A moment of quizzical silence passed. How do you know? Lillian asked. I've been practicing, Matt answered. So that's where my peaches have been going. Here's 50 cents that says you can't, Marianne said, tossing 2 quarters on the table. Never heard of this sport, Ben said. That's 'cause I invented it, Matt answered. You're gonna spoil your dinner, Matt, Lillian warned. Does it include the juice? Karen asked. Of course, Matt said. The juice is the last part. That's my specialty. Why don't you take up baseball or something, baseball or something, Matt? Bull said, spearing 3 slices of beef roast with his fork and reaching for the gravy. Marianne went to the sink and returned to the table with a can opener. With dignity, Matthew opened the can of peaches and sat poised with the huge spoon he had selected from Lillian's silver service. Who will keep time? Matt asked. I will, Marianne offered, checking her watch. 10 seconds. 5 seconds. Go. With a slight splash, Matt began scooping quartered slices of peaches into his mouth with such a zealous sucking and slurping that even his father paused to witness the divertissement. He did not chew the peaches, rather he swallowed them whole, as though they were live goldfish with bone and viscera intact. The juice rolled down his mouth, and his neck dripped on the table and matted his hair. As each second passed, the noise of the contest increased, for it became necessary for Matt to breathe at the same time he was eating. When peach juice began to flow from his nose, and when Matthew had gagged twice, Lillian quietly excused herself from the table. But her son did not miss a stroke as he shoveled the peaches from the can to his mouth with extraordinary speed and endurance. When Marianne cried, 10 seconds left, Matthew picked up the entire can, turned it upside down, and drained the juice violently, his Adam's apple straining and pulsing like a metronome. He slammed the empty can on the table a moment before Marianne called time. His brother and 2 sisters gave him a standing ovation which lasted over 20 seconds. Bull just shook his head and concentrated on the roast beef. Once he looked up at a grinning, triumphant Matthew and said, "I'm raising a damn peach-eating champ, Jesus Christ." At 6:30, Ben finished packing his uniform and was waiting in his room for the summons from his father to leave for the game. Kneeling before the crucifix in his room, he mouthed a prayer that instantly shamed him, and he renounced it as soon as he was certain that it had been fully articulated and received by the ear of God, which he imagined to be as large and black as a galaxy. But his renunciation lacked the fire of the original prayer. Matt prayed for his own personal success. The team could lose, in fact, could be beaten badly. But Ben wanted and needed a credible game while under the dispassionate gaze of college scouts. The prayer rose out of him obscenely. Outside his window, he heard the sound of hoofs drumming against the pavement. He looked down and saw Toomer pulling his wagon into the backyard. Grabbing his gym bag, he rushed down to see him. When he reached the back door, he saw Toomer presenting Lillian with the flowers he had not sold that day. "Toomer, bless your sweet little heart for thinking of me. I'll put them in water right now and make an arrangement for my dining room table. You sure I can't pay you something?" "No, ma'am, I kept them out for you." "Ben, you see what Toomer brought me? Isn't that the sweetest, most thoughtful thing you ever heard tell of?" "Oh, Mom," Ben thought, "she can make people feel better over nothing than anyone I've ever met." "Well, Toomer, I'm going to have to bake you some sweet potato pie and bring it down to you sometime this week." "No, ma'am, no need," the man answered, smiling. "I didn't ask you if I could. I told you I was going to bring you a pie, and I'm going to do it. May the Lord stick pins in my eyes if I don't." She ran into the house to put the flowers into water before the family left for the game. Ben walked up to the mule and looked up at Toomer, who watched him with eyes that were dark and kind. It embarrassed Ben when he realized he had not seen Toomer at all since basketball season had begun. "Hey, white boy," Toomer said. "It's a nice-looking donkey you got there," Ben said. "That ain't no donkey, white boy. This here man of war. The fastest mule in Ravenel County." "Well, it's about the ugliest mule I ever did see." "That's so? Well, I reckon you about the ugliest white boy I ever seen, too." "How you been doing, Toomer? I miss seeing you," Ben said, jumping up on the wagon seat beside the black man and punching him affectionately in the arm. "Not so bad. Been reading in the paper. You some kind of shiny stuff now. You too much stuff to go hunt up Mr. Oyster this weekend." "We got an away game on Friday," Ben answered. "Weekend only lasts one day for you." "I'm riding around with Sammy Wurtzberger on Saturday. There's church on Sunday. How about Sunday afternoon?" "That's good. I wish you could come see me play tonight, Toomer." "I ain't no fool, white boy. Only a crazy expletive will go strutting in the middle of them shabby dressed and white folk. But show 'em some strut tonight, white boy. Wiggle when they want to see some waddle." "I will, Toomer. Thanks for coming by." "No, don't play too good, so you think you got too much stuff to come see Toomer." "You know better than that, Toomer. Get off this wagon, white boy. Get this damn donkey out my yard before I call the police, flower boy." On this night, the locker room had exposed nerves. Philip Turner vomited into a janitor's sink surrounded by mops and pails. Coach Spinks put out a cigarette by dropping it into a newly opened bottle of RC. Art the Fart combed his hair for 15 minutes straight, sat down to await the pregame talk, then excused himself, explaining he had forgotten to comb his hair. Ben tied and untied his shoes without a single recollection of having done so. Finally, the whole team was dressed, had listened to Coach Spinks's pregame harangue, and now waited on that trough of suspended time when each second seemed weighed down by the glistening bullion of tension. "We gotta take the challenge to them," Jim Don shouted. "Yeah," everyone agreed. "Their ass is grass and we're the lawnmowers," Art added. There was a commotion at the locker room door, and the manager's voice was raised in a shrill, feckless protest. Ben, where are you, Ben? A voice boomed. Mortified and more than slightly irritated, Ben answered, back here, Dad. Colonel Meacham walked into the alcove, red-faced, expansive, and massive. It was the first time that Ben had noticed that his father had not changed into his civilian clothes since he had gotten home. Bull walked past several players to get to his son. There are college scouts from 4 different colleges in the stands tonight. 4 colleges. You got a nut tonight, boy. Those guys are looking for a scorer. Dad, would you go back and sit with Mom for gosh sakes? We're trying to get ready for a game. I'm trying to get you fired up, Ben. There's people coming to watch you, son. You ought to go for about 40 big ones tonight, Colonel Meacham said, unable to contain his ecstasy. We'll help Ben get it tonight, Colonel, Pinky said. Attaboy, Pinky. I want all you boys to shine tonight. The largest crowd in the history of the school is out there screaming their lungs out. The cheerleaders are so happy they're jumping through their own assholes. Ben could smell the heavy presence of bourbon on his father's breath. Beneath the flight jacket, he could detect the slim outline of his father's silver flask. Since it was not a Friday and there was no happy hour, he had forgotten to keep track of how much liquor his father had consumed. But all the signs were there. Bull Meacham was approaching that prime meridian of inebriation that his wife, his sons, and his daughters, based on a grievously embattled history, had come to fear. I'll see you later, Dad, Ben said. These boys think they're tough, Bull said, slurring the last 2 words. Bust them in the chops the first play of the game, sports fans, and they'll know you mean business. You gotta draw first blood against a bunch of hogs like this. If you show weakness or fear, they'll chew your new belly button. Thanks, Dad. See you later, Ben said, leading his father by the arm toward the door. Bull whispered to Ben when they reached the door, I want you to look like a damn Gatling gun, you're shooting so much. Okay, Dad, okay. Go sit with Mama. A great ball player always has his best games against the best teams. I will, Dad, I promise. When Ben returned, the other players grinned at his obvious discomfiture at his father's intrusion into the forbidden realm of the pregame locker room. Coach Spinks would not have been amused. Sorry, gang, Dad gets excited at times like this. You think your dad's excited? Art said. Mine ain't pooped in 3 days. Neither have I, said Pinky. Boy, your dad's really tanked up, Jim Don said. No, he isn't, Jim Don. He's just excited. You don't think I know a drunk when I see one, Jim Don countered. Shut up, Jim Don, Pinky said fiercely. Don't talk like that about someone's old man. There was a period of silence. 2 of the players went to wash their mouths out. Ben leaned over to Pinky and asked, Where's your daddy, Pinky? I haven't seen him at any of the games. Is he here tonight? The silence deepened. Ben felt immediately that the question was lanced with pain. He was cut in half by a skier's boat 2 summers ago, Pinky said. Gosh, I'm sorry, Pinky. You didn't know, Pinky said. In the moments that followed, Ben forgot about the game and concentrated instead on his uncanny instinct, his intuitive genius for asking the wrong question. This ability normally asserted itself when he was nervous or did not know what to say, or felt it was a social obligation to say something. Throughout Ben's life, he could walk up to a complete stranger, ask him a single question, and hit with remarkable accuracy the raw nerve. Did you sprain your ankle? Ben would ask. No, I limped because I had polio as a child, the stranger would reply. Where's your mother? Ben would ask. She died of cancer last night, would come the reply. The nadir of his distinguished career in asking the wrong question had come when he was playing second base in Pony League, and a boy walked up to bat who clearly had not been trained with an eye for style or classicism. Ben yelled out in one of those rare yet complete moments of silence, a doldrum among the spectators. Hey, why didn't someone teach that kid how to bat? Ben heard the gasp from the crowd, and in one of those desperate moments of prescience before the trial by fire begins, he knew that the dragon of hurt was hissing out of an empty, grief-ruled place from the boy at home plate. Why don't you come here and teach me how to bat, wise guy? The boy said, holding up the stump of his left hand. the bone encased in skin and tapering to a thin, vulnerable cone. The moment had become a metaphor, and Ben had found something pure and universal in that moment of exposure, and he carried the image of that stump in his mind as though it were a talisman that could ward off future errors of judgment. But it had not worked that way. If there was an affliction, if there were a secret that caused great pain, if there was something hidden behind a smile or protected by a grimace, then Ben could bring it to the surface with an innocent, ill-conceived question. And he had an instinct for preciseness. He could ask the absolutely worst question at the most inopportune moment. "Why didn't you and Mrs. Smith ever have any children?" Ben would ask. "We did," would come the answer from a voice of immeasurable cold. "They all died in a fire." There was never a proper or adequate response to these answers. One merely withered. The buzzer went off, ending the girls' game, and the voice of the manager squealed out for the team to take the court. Then there was movement, and the borning once more of the transcendent fraternity that comes between athletes in the unseen moments when they move together toward the lights of an arena and the waiting crowd. Suddenly bursting into light and the vision of 800 eyes that had gathered to see them prevail, they spread out thoughtlessly, the layup lines forming without conscience, animals of habit, and each boy according to his own capacity drank in the applause that poured over his entrance. Ben bathed in the unction of his shouted name. Bull and Lillian occupied the fourth row above the scorer's table. They sat with Paige and Virgil Hedgepath and several other pilots from the squadron. Behind them sat Ed Mills, Cleve Goins, Hobie Rawls, Johnny Boyd, Doc Rattery, and Zal Posey. Standing Karen with her two friends to the right and beneath the scoreboard, Ben waved to them and winked as he retrieved a loose ball. He could not find Matt and Marianne in the crowd. At the jump center in the middle of the court, a short, stocky, rat-faced boy came up to Ben, grabbed him by the belt, and growled at him, "You aren't going to score a single damn point tonight, Meacham, because I'm going to be on you like stink on shit." "I ain't Roselle Peanut," Ben answered. "What?" Peninsula was the tallest team that Ravenel had encountered all year. Their center, Sanders, was 6 feet 5 inches tall, and both their forwards were over 6'3". Art looked undernourished and lost as he stepped into the circle to jump ball with Sanders. Sanders tipped the ball to Peanut Abbott, as he had done to begin every game in the whole season, only this time Ben anticipated where Sanders would tip it, left his position as soon as the centers were airborne, and reached the spot where the ball landed at precisely the same moment as Abbott, gained control of the ball and broke for the bucket. Abbott crabbed along beside him until Ben whirled with a reverse dribble, sprinted for the basket, and laid up the first 2 points of the game. The crowd erupted in a deep, sinewy exultation of triumph. Peanut took the ball out in confusion, angry at himself and anxious to repair the damage and erase the embarrassment. Bull saw Ben set up a trick that Bull had taught his son. Ben pretended to start back to the other end of the court for defense, but his eye was on the rattled guard Abbott, who stepped out of bounds quickly and looked for the other guard, who motioned for the ball near the foul line. The flow of every man on the court was heading for the opposite end of the court, until the ball left Abbott's fingers and Ben cut back between the two guards, intercepted the ball cleanly, and in a single dribble scored his second layup in less than 12 seconds. Then the game assumed a dimension of reality. Sanders began to work the pivot with a grace and instinct that was a pleasure to watch. There was an artistry to his shots and a lordliness to his moves. He scored on 3 straight turn-around jump shots as the pace of the game quickened. Jim Don scored on a tap-in. Abbott scored on a layup when Ben failed to get back on defense. "Defense, Meacham, you bum," he heard his father scream. Phillips scored on a long jump shot from the side. Sanders faked Art, wheeled around on him, and soared up high for a dunk shot. Coming down court, Ben got by Abbott and drove straight to Sanders, who moved up to stuff the layup. Ben slid the ball off to Art, who scored an unmolested layup. Toward the end of the quarter, Ben stole 2 passes from the same forward and drove the length of the court to score. On both shots, he was fouled by Peanut Abbott. Both shots were answered immediately by 2 arching, swooping hook shots by Sanders. In the middle of the second quarter, Ben had a spurt where he played the game better than he had ever played it in his life, played it better than he was capable of playing it. He scored on 3 savage drives to the basket, and on 2 of the drives he was fouled by Sanders. Then he hit on 2 jump shots and led 2 successive fast breaks where he shuffled bounce passes to Phillip and Art, filling the lanes. To end the half, he took the ball away from Abbott on the dribble and scored on an ostentatious reverse layup after a behind-the-back dribble that had more relationship to the big top than it did to basketball. But no matter what Ben did, his efforts were matched by the unmeretricious competence of Wyatt Sanders. He was simply as good as he had to be. Several times he slapped Ben on the fanny as Ben passed him, going to the bench between quarters or during timeouts. It was a meaningful slap, and Ben understood the message it conveyed. There were times during athletic contests when 2 of the athletes became aware that the true contest was between them, and that their team would win or lose according to the quality of their performance. When Ben's eyes met Sanders' eyes, something of worth was transferred between them. The relationship grew stronger as the game wore on, and the sense of competition between them intensified. By the fury with which they strove to win, they were honoring each other and celebrating each other's gifts. It was a feeling, a tenderness, and the sweetly savage brotherhood of athletics that came very seldom. By halftime, Ben had scored 21 points and was in the middle of the best game of his life. Sanders had scored 16 points and was in the middle of one of his best. Calhoun trailed Peninsula by 6 points, but Sanders had picked up his 3rd foul while trying to intercept a drive by Ben at the end of the half. The strategy derived by Coach Spinks during intermission was sound and surprisingly so. He wanted Ben to get the ball and drive straight towards Sanders, trying to draw the 4th and 5th fouls. Without Sanders, Spinks felt that the Peninsula team would be demoralized beyond redemption. The key was to eliminate Sanders as soon as possible in the 3rd quarter. At center court for the second half tip-off, Abbott once more seized Ben's belt and said, "You ain't going to score a damn point this second half, Meacham. Come on, get off it, Abbott. I told you I wasn't Rosie Roselle. You wait and see if you score." Sanders easily controlled the jump ball, tapping it to the red-headed guard who played opposite Abbott. The guard dribbled it into his own backcourt as he watched for Sanders, who was maneuvering to get free underneath. When Sanders broke for the foul line, the guard lofted a lazy pass in the middle. Jim Don anticipated the pass and anticipated it on the run. Ben broke for the far basket. Jim Don's pass was long and Ben had to sprint for it. As he caught the ball, he had to shoot at the exact same moment. He threw the ball up softly off balance as he headed out of bounds. The ball rolled around the rim and dropped out. Ben tried to regain his balance before he slammed into the folding chairs and spectators sitting at his end of the court. He gained control of himself by falling against a man and a woman, bracing his fall against their shoulders. At the split second he was turning around, Peanut Abbott cracked into the back of Ben's head, his forearm shivering against the base of the brain. Ben flew over 2 rows of folding chairs and fell on top of a small girl, who screamed until a host of arms lifted Ben out of the wreckage and off the girl. Ben's vision had blurred, and he had difficulty fixing his eye on a single point in the mayhem that had unleashed itself. One of the referees was keeping Jim Don from swinging at Peanut Abbott. The noise was deafening. As Ben tried to clear his head, he had one crystal clear vision. His father coming out of the stands, massive, enraged, and shouting words that Ben could not hear. Then Bull was over him, screaming. "You better get that little bastard. You don't come home tonight. I'll beat your ass if you don't get that little bastard. You hear me, boy?" And Ben nodded yes. And the referee signaled that Ben was to shoot 2 foul shots for an intentional foul. He heard a warning being issued to Peanut Abbott, and he felt the hands of his teammates grasping his shoulders and asking him if he was all right. Yes. He answered through a haze that was alternately too much light and too much darkness. Coach Spinks called timeout to let tempers cool and let Ben collect himself. Bull followed Ben to the huddle. "You get him. I'm going to stay down here on this floor till you put him on the deck." Then Ben tasted the water that the manager held in a ladle. He poured it over his head. He splashed against his face, closed his eyes, and jerked his head back when the Ammonia capsule was placed by his nostril. "You all right, Poot?" Coach Spink said. "Yeah, I'm all right." "Get that little pimp," he heard his father cry out near the huddle of players, "or I'm going to get you." He went to the foul line, his head clearing slowly. He missed the first shot. He missed the second one. Looking to the sidelines, he saw his father keeping step with him, following him down the court in front of the first row of spectators. His face was savagely contorted. "Get him! Get him!" his father chanted. Ben intercepted a pass intended for Abbott, beat him down court, and laid the ball in. Bull had run with him, sprinted along the sidelines along with him, stalking his son. You better get him, damn it, or don't come home." His father's voice entered Ben's ear like an ice pick. There was not another voice he could hear in the crowd of 400. It was the voice of his besieged youth, the voice that had screamed out the death of enemy pilots in the Pacific, the voice that had swept down on retreating battalions crossing the Nakhtong River in Korea, the voice that could order a squadron from the heavens to set fire to Havana, or to decimate a Russian fleet, or to start a world war. But most of all, as Ben watched the violent figure of his father pacing the sidelines, it was a voice that Ben knew he would obey, that he was programmed to obey, a voice that he dared not disobey. Sanders scored. Pinky took the ball out of bounds and passed it to Ben. "Get him, son." "Yes, sir," Ben said in reflex as he brought the ball up the court, eyes pinned on that rodent face of his enemy. As he neared Peanut, Ben suddenly flipped the ball directly in Peanut's hands, stepped aside, and with a flourish of his arm offered Peanut Abbott the whole court with an easy layup. Surprised, Peanut hesitated, then broke for his basket, not noticing that Ben trailed him, and not noticing that a flight-jacketed figure trailed Ben on the sidelines. As he reached the foul line, Peanut slowed up, wanting to make sure he did not blow the sure layup. When he left his feet, Ben Meacham was there. Timing Abbott's leap perfectly, Ben's shoulder cut the boy's feet from under him when Abbott was at the apex of his jump. Abbott somersaulted wildly, dangerously out of control. He came down hard, his arm hitting the wooden floor first, then his head. The crack of a broken bone shot through the gymnasium. Ben was tackled by one of the forwards, who flailed at him with both his fists and his feet. Whistles blew, both benches emptied, coaches sprinted to the floor. Mr. Dacus wrestled Jim Don Cooper to the court, and the man on the PA system pleaded for the fans to remain in their seats. Pinky and Phillip had mounted the back of the forward who had tackled Ben. When order was restored somewhat, the referees called timeout while Dr. Rattery examined the injuries sustained by Peanut Abbott. One of the referees came to the Calhoun huddle, pointed to Ben, and said, "Number 13, you're out of the game. Go to the shower room. Coach Spinks, there will be a report made to the high school commission about this boy." Ben trotted down the sidelines toward the locker room. Before he could enter the doorway, his father caught him and clapped him on the back again and again. "That's my boy. That's playing like you were a Chicago boy. That's how a Chicago boy would do it. And don't think those scouts weren't impressed. They're looking for a guy with killer instinct. That's showing guts, Ben. I'm proud of you, son." And then desperately Ben plunged through the double doors, away from the voice of the crowd, into the anonymity of the dressing room, where he sat on the wooden bench before his locker and cried out of shame. For 2 minutes he wept, his arms folded on his thighs, his head buried in his arms. He did not hear Mr. Dacus enter the locker room, did not see him down against the cinder block wall. Finally, Mr. Dacus spoke to Ben. "How's the little pissant?" "I've never felt worse in my whole life," Ben choked out between sobs. "Abbott's got a broken arm. I bet he feels worse than you do." "I'm sorry, Mr. D. Oh, gosh, I am so sorry." "He looked like he was hurting pretty bad. The bone was sticking through the flesh when we put him in the police car with Doc Rattery to go down to the hospital. You messed up bad, pissant." "Yes, sir, I know." "What do you think I ought to do about it?" "I don't know, sir." "Well, help me think about it, Ben. Calhoun is my high school. I'm damn proud of it and damn proud of the kids that attend it. It's well thought of all over the state because of the accomplishments of these kids. They've worked hard to make the image of Calhoun High respectable and worthy of that respect." Then along comes some sorry damn pissant who doesn't have the guts to tell his father to go take a flying jump when that father is just about as wrong as a father can possibly be. So because he has no guts, he breaks a boy's arm in the most unsportsmanlike display I have ever witnessed in my whole life. What you did, Ben, was low, base, cowardly, and unforgivable. Yes, sir, I know, Ben said. What do you think I ought to do about it? Take me outside and kill me, Ben answered. No, pissant, I'm not going to do that. But you are never going to participate in another varsity sport at Calhoun High School. You have 4 games left in the basketball season. You will not be playing in any of them, nor will you be allowed to play baseball this spring. Do you think that's fair? Yes, sir. I don't. I don't think that's a fair exchange for a broken arm. I think you're getting the best end of the deal. Yes, sir. I want to extract as much bad feeling as I can from you, Ben. Most of all, I wanted you to know how disappointed I am in you personally, and how what you did tonight disgusts me as badly as anything one of my students has ever done. Take the uniform off. I don't want to see a Calhoun uniform even near you, Mr. Dacus said, walking slowly toward the door. Before he went back to watch the final quarter, he turned to Ben and said, "See you in school, pissant, and the end of the world." That night in bed, Ben heard his mother tiptoe into the room and sit down on his bed. He braced himself for one of Lillian's cold lectures to enfilade the dispirited citadel of his self-respect. He waited for her anger to come in fusillades of outraged motherhood, smothering Southern platitudes and Catholic theology. Her stare impaled him through the dark, but she said nothing. She just merely groped until she found his hand. Then she just held it, nothing more.